2. The mail-order bride service hadn't mentioned the blood. Mara Velez saw it the moment the truck dropped her at the trailhead, dark stains on the wooden sign marking the path to Rowan Hale's property. Old blood, weathered by seasons, but unmistakable. The driver, a man named Chen, who'd barely spoken during the 3-hour drive from town, noticed her staring. "Dear," he said, unconvincing. "Sure." Mara adjusted the straps on her 2 duffel bags. Everything she owned compressed into 80 pounds of fabric and stubbornness. Chen didn't move to help with the bags. "Last woman made it 4 days. One before that, 6 hours. He pulled out a laminated card from his jacket and handed it to her. "Emergency number. Works if you can get down to Miller's Creek, about 8 miles that way." He pointed east toward nothing but trees. "Phone won't work up here." Mara took the card, studied it, then tucked it into her coat pocket without comment. She'd memorized the number already. Had memorized everything she could find about this place, which wasn't much. Rowan Hale, age 34, owned 200 acres at 8,000 feet. No criminal record. No social media presence. No reviews, no complaints, no trace of a normal life. Just a listing on a website for men too broken or remote for traditional dating, and women desperate enough to answer. She qualified. "You sure about this?" Chen tried one more time. "I can take you back. No charge." "I'm sure." "He's not—" Chen stopped himself. "People say things about why he's up here alone." "People always say things." Mara lifted both bags. Heavy, but manageable. Everything she'd learned in her 31 years had taught her the same lesson. Carry your own weight, expect nothing, survive. "Which way?" Chen pointed at the blood-marked sign. 3 miles. Trail's maintained until you hit his property line, then it gets rough. He'll probably meet you halfway if he's—" Another pause. "If he's in a meeting mood, c'est ça. And if he's not, then you walk 3 miles for nothing." Chen climbed back into his truck. "Good luck, lady. You're gonna need it." The truck's engine faded down the mountain road, leaving Mara in silence so complete it felt like pressure against her eardrums. She'd grown up in cities, Phoenix, then Las Vegas, places where quiet meant danger, meant someone was waiting to hurt you. This quiet was different, older. It didn't care enough about her to be dangerous. She started walking. The trail was clear enough, winding through pines that blocked most of the weak November sunlight. Snow hadn't hit yet, but it was coming. She could smell it in the air, taste the metallic promise of it. Her boots, new and stiff, rubbed blisters into her heels within the first mile. She didn't stop. Stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering everything she'd left behind in Las Vegas. The efficiency apartment with black mold in the bathroom. The casino job that paid just enough to keep her desperate. The loan sharks who'd made their final offer very clear, pay or disappear. She'd chosen disappear. At the 2-mile mark, the trail narrowed. Chen was right. The maintained path ended abruptly, replaced by something that was barely more than a game trail. Mara had to set down her bags twice to navigate around fallen logs, her breath coming harder in the thin air. She wasn't out of shape, but Vegas sat at 2,000 feet. This was different. Her lungs burned. She almost missed him. Rowan Hale stood about 30 feet off the trail, partially hidden behind a massive pine. He wasn't hiding exactly, more like he'd grown there, another piece of the mountain landscape. Tall, maybe 6'2", with a build that came from work rather than gyms. Dark hair that needed cutting, beard that needed trimming, clothes that were clean but worn soft with age. He held an axe in one hand, blade resting against his shoulder, and watched her with the kind of stillness that made her think of the desert predators she'd seen as a kid, patient, calculating. "You're early," he said, voice rough from disuse. Mara set down her bags and straightened, meeting his stare. Truck driver was eager to leave. They usually are. He didn't move closer. "You're Mara Velez. And you're Rowan Hale." She waited, but he didn't offer anything else. "The listing said you needed a wife." The listing said a lot of things. His eyes moved over her, assessment without warmth. "You read the terms?" 12-month trial period, no legal marriage unless both parties agree after the year. I work, you provide housing and food. Either of us can end it with 2 weeks' notice, weather permitting. She'd memorized that too. "I signed the papers, you should have copies." "I got them." He shifted the axe to his other shoulder. What it doesn't say is why a woman who looks like she can read and write wants to bury herself on a mountain with a stranger. What it doesn't say is why a man who owns 200 acres needs to buy a wife off the internet. Mara kept her voice level. I figure we both got our reasons. Mine are my business. Something flickered across his face. Might have been amusement, might have been respect. Hard to tell. Fair enough. He finally moved, closing the distance between them with an easy stride that covered ground faster than it should have. Up close, she could see the scars, one across his left eyebrow, another on his jaw, smaller ones on his hands. Working scars, not fighting scars. I'll take one of those. He reached for the heavier duffel before she could argue, slinging it over his shoulder like it weighed nothing. Started walking without checking if she followed. Mara grabbed the second bag and caught up. The driver said 7 women before me. 6. Oh, Rowan didn't slow down. Last one never made it past the trailhead, took one look and called her brother to come get her. What happened to the others? First one lasted 2 weeks. Cried every night, said the silence made her crazy. Second one made it 3 days before she tried to hike out in a storm. I had to track her down before she froze to death. He stepped over a rotted log without breaking stride. Third one stole my truck and got it stuck in a ditch 5 miles down. Fourth one was allergic to pine trees, didn't know until she got here. Fifth one, he paused. Fifth one was fine until she saw a bear, packed her stuff while I was chopping wood, and left a note. And the sixth? Sixth one was religious, real religious. Spent 4 days trying to save my soul before she decided I was past redemption. He glanced back at her. You religious? No. Good. I don't need saving. The trail opened up suddenly, revealing a clearing maybe 2 acres wide. The cabin sat in the center, and Mara felt something in her chest loosen despite herself. It wasn't pretty. Rough-hewn logs, metal roof, small windows, but it was solid. Real. The kind of structure that would stand against weather and time because someone had built it to last, not to impress. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. A woodshed stood to the left, stocked full. To the right, a smaller structure that might have been a workshop or storage. Beyond the clearing, the mountain rose up sharply, pine-covered slopes disappearing into low clouds. It's not much, Rowan said, and for the first time his voice held something other than flat neutrality. Might have been defensiveness. But it's warm and dry. It's perfect, Mara said, and meant it. He looked at her then, really looked, trying to figure out if she was lying. She let him look. She had a face that people usually rate as pretty. Dark eyes, clear skin, features that photographed well. But she'd learned young that pretty was just another tool, useful when you needed it, irrelevant when you didn't. Up here, it didn't matter. Come on, Rowan finally said. I'll show you inside. The cabin was one large room with a loft above. Stone fireplace on the north wall, crackling with a fire that threw real heat. Kitchen area with a propane stove, deep sink, rough wooden counters. Table and 2 chairs. A bed in one corner, just one, Mara noted, and a worn couch near the fireplace. Shelves lined with books, actual paper books, hundreds of them. The place smelled like wood smoke and coffee and something else, something green, pine sap maybe. Bathrooms there, too. Rowan pointed to a door on the east wall. Water comes from a spring up the mountain, gravity-fed. It's cold but clean. There's a shower, lukewarm at best, and the toilet works. Septic system solid. Mara set down her bag and looked around. Clean. Not spotless, but clean in the way that mattered. No dirt, no garbage, no rot. The kind of clean that came from someone who lived alone and took care of their space because nobody else would. Propane tanks out back, Rowan continued, awkward now, like he'd forgotten how to give tours. Gets refilled twice a year, spring and fall. Just did the fall fill, so we're good through winter. Generators in the shed if the power goes out. He stopped. We don't have power. No grid up here. Solar panels on the roof run the lights and the water pump, but that's it. No TV, no internet, no cell service. I know. Mara had read all of this in his listing. It's fine. Phone's a landline, works most of the time. There's a radio too, CB system, connects to the ranger station and a few neighbors down the mountain. He was talking faster now, filling silence like it made him nervous. Food storage is in the cellar. Root vegetables, canned goods, dried meat. We're stocked for winter, but if you can cook, that'd be useful. I can cook. Not well, but adequately. She could learn better. Rowan nodded, ran a hand through his hair. The loft is yours. I sleep down here. There's blankets, a good mattress. It gets cold at night, but the heat rises, so you'll be warmer than me. Mara looked up at the loft, accessed by a ladder, private space. He was giving her private space. Something in her relaxed another notch. Rules, Rowan said abruptly. I got rules. All right. Don't go in the workshop without asking. Don't waste propane. Don't leave food out. We got bears, and a fed bear is a dead bear. Don't go hiking alone until you know the property. Don't. He stopped, jaw working. Don't expect me to be something I'm not. And what are you? Broken. He said it flat, factual. I don't do small talk. I don't do romance. I work, I eat, I sleep. That's it. If you need conversation, I got books. If you need warmth, there's the fire. If you need more than that, he met her eyes. Then you should leave now, while the trail's still clear. Mara held his stare. I'm not here for romance. I'm here because I needed to disappear, and you needed help. That's the deal. I keep my end, you keep yours. Why'd you need to disappear? Same reason you're up here alone, I'd guess. Because the world down there, she gestured vaguely toward the trail, toward everything beyond this clearing. Didn't work out. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp. Your stuff's getting wet. She looked down. Melting snow from her boots was puddling on his clean floor. Sorry. Don't be sorry, just there's hooks by the door for wet things, towels in the bathroom. He picked up his axe from where he'd leaned it by the door. I got work to finish before dark. Make yourself at home. Food's in the pantry if you're hungry. He left before she could respond, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Mara stood in the silence, dripping melting snow onto the floor of a cabin owned by a man she'd known for 20 minutes, 8,000 feet up a mountain she'd never seen before today. Every survival instinct she'd honed over 31 years screamed that this was insane, that she should call Chen while she still could, that staying here was asking for disaster. Instead, she took off her wet boots and lined them up by the door. The first 2 days passed in careful silence. Rowan kept to a routine so rigid it felt like watching clockwork. Up before dawn, fire stoked, coffee made. He'd drink 1 cup in complete silence, staring at the flames, then dress and head outside. Sometimes chopping wood, sometimes working on the cabin's exterior, sometimes disappearing into the trees with his rifle. He'd return for lunch, simple food, bread and cheese and dried meat, eat without speaking, then go back out. Dinner was the same. By 8, he'd be reading by the fire, and by 9, he was in bed. Mara adapted around him. She claimed the loft space, unpacking her few possessions into something like order, explored the cabin's storage, taking inventory. Root cellar stocked with potatoes, carrots, onions, winter squash, pantry full of dried beans, rice, flour, salt, canned goods, vegetables mostly, some fruit, lots of tomatoes. Dried meat hanging in the cold room. Someone had planned well. Rowan, presumably. On the second day, she cooked dinner. Nothing fancy. Roasted chicken from the cold storage, potatoes, carrots, bread she found in a wooden box. But she seasoned it properly, timed it so everything was hot when he came in at 6, set the table like it mattered. Rowan stopped in the doorway, staring at the set table like it might attack him. What's this? Dinner. Mara filled 2 plates. Sit down before it gets cold. He sat, slowly, like he was approaching a trap. Picked up his fork, took a bite, chewed, swallowed. It's good, he said finally. Sounded surprised. Thanks. They ate in silence, but it was different than the first 2 nights. Less hostile, more like 2 people sharing space because it made sense to, not because they were forced to. The 6th woman, Mara said, breaking the quiet. The religious one. What did she say about you? Rowan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Why? Curious. He set down his fork, took a long breath. She said I was running from something, that only guilty men hide on mountains, that she could see darkness in me, and if I didn't accept salvation, I was damned. His voice stayed level, but something flickered in his eyes. Then she found my pills and decided I was demon-possessed. Pills? Antidepressants. Anxiety medication. I get them mailed up from a doctor in town. He picked up his fork again, aggressive. Took me years to admit I needed them. Took longer to find a doctor who'd prescribe without demanding I come in for therapy sessions I can't afford and wouldn't attend anyway. So, yeah, I take pills. If that's a problem, it's not a problem. Mara cut him off. I took them too for a while. In Vegas. Helped until I couldn't afford them anymore. Rowan looked at her. Really looked. And something in his face softened. Not much, but enough. The world makes people crazy. Then it punishes them for breaking. Yeah, Mara said quietly. Yeah, it does. They finished dinner in silence again. But it was comfortable now. Shared understanding without words. That night, lying in the loft while wind rattled the windows, Mara listened to Rowan's breathing from below. Steady, even. The breathing of someone who could sleep through anything because he'd trained himself not to care about threats. She understood that too. The storm hit on day 6. Mara woke to the sound of wind screaming against the cabin walls. Not just wind, something bigger, meaner. The kind of weather that wanted to kill you just to prove it could. She climbed down from the loft to find Rowan already up, fully dressed, staring out the window at darkness. How bad? She asked. Bad. He didn't turn around. Early season storm, should have had another week. But the mountain does what it wants. Snow was already piling against the windows, visible in the pre-dawn darkness because of how white it was, how complete. Mara had seen snow before, even in Vegas, rare, but it happened. But nothing like this. This was snow that meant business. We need to check the animals, Rowan said. What animals? Chickens, goats, they're in the shelter behind the cabin. He finally turned to look at her. I didn't mention them before because they're not part of the deal. You don't have to. I'll help. Mara was already pulling on her boots. What do I need to do? Something crossed his face, surprise, maybe gratitude, but he covered it quickly. Bundle up, everything you got. It's going to be bad out there. He wasn't kidding. The cold hit like a physical force the moment Mara stepped outside. Wind ripped the breath from her lungs, drove snow into her face hard enough to sting. She could barely see Rowan, even though he was 3 feet ahead of her, leading the way to the shelter. The animal shelter was a solid structure, smaller than the cabin, but built with the same care. Inside, 6 chickens huddled together in one corner, while 3 goats bleated nervously in the other. Rowan moved fast, checking water, distributing feed, examining each animal with practiced efficiency. Hold this. He handed her a bucket. I need to fill their water. It'll freeze within an hour, but at least they'll have something. Mara held the bucket while he worked, watching his hands, quick, competent, gentle with the animals. The goats calmed under his touch. The chickens settled. Whatever he was broken about, it wasn't this. This, he knew. You raised them? She asked. Bought them 3 years ago. Needed eggs and milk, seemed smarter than hauling supplies up the mountain. He finished with the water. They're good company. Don't talk back. Unlike the 7 brides, he almost smiled. Almost. Yeah, unlike them. They made it back to the cabin just as the storm intensified. Rowan barred the door, checked the windows, fed the fire until it roared. Outside, the wind howled like something alive and angry. How long? Mara asked. Could be a day, could be 3. He pulled off his wet coat, hung it to dry. We got food, water, heat. We'll be fine. But something in his voice suggested fine was relative. The first day wasn't bad. They moved around each other carefully, each doing their own tasks. Mara cooked, cleaned, organized. Rowan maintained the fire, checked the doors and windows, read. By nightfall, they'd settled into an uncomfortable but manageable rhythm. The second day was harder. Cabin fever was a real thing, Mara discovered. The walls pressed in. The silence between conversations stretched longer. She caught herself pacing, counting steps, anything to burn off energy that had nowhere to go. Rowan retreated into himself, speaking less, disappearing into his books like they were fortresses. By the 3rd day, something had to break. Tell me why you're really up here, Mara said. They were sitting at the table, eating lunch. Outside, the storm continued its assault, relentless. Rowan didn't look up from his food. Told you, needed space. That's not a reason. That's an excuse. She pushed her plate away. You built this place. You maintain it. You take care of animals. You read philosophy. She'd seen his books. Heavy stuff. You're not hiding. You're punishing yourself. His jaw tightened. You don't know me. I know hiding. I've done it my whole life. Mara leaned forward. So tell me, what are you punishing yourself for? Nothing that concerns you. Everything up here concerns me now. I'm stuck in this cabin with you for 3 more months of winter, minimum. I signed papers that tie me to you for a year, so yeah, it concerns me. She kept her voice level, firm. You want me to trust you. You give me something to trust. Rowan stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the window, stared out at the white nothing. For a long moment, Mara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, voice low. I had a brother, Daniel, younger by 2 years. He didn't turn around. We grew up in Montana, small town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and nobody ever leaves. Our dad was a drunk. Our mom died when I was 12. So I raised Daniel, made sure he ate, got to school, stayed out of trouble. Mara stayed quiet, waiting. We were going to leave together. Soon as Daniel graduated high school, we'd save up, head somewhere better. Denver, maybe. Seattle. Somewhere with jobs, opportunities, a future. His hand pressed against the window glass. But Daniel got impatient, met some guys, started running with them. Small-time stuff at first. Shoplifting, vandalism. Then it escalated. Armed robbery. Mara's stomach sank. I tried to stop him. Told him he was throwing his life away. We fought about it. Bad. He said I wasn't his father. Couldn't tell him what to do. I said... Rowan's voice cracked. I said if he went through with it, he was on his own. That I wouldn't help him, wouldn't bail him out, wouldn't visit him in prison. The silence stretched. He did the robbery. Got caught. The store owner had a gun. There was a shootout. Daniel took 2 rounds to the chest. Rowan finally turned around, and his face was blank, empty. He died in the ambulance, 20 years old, and the last thing I ever said to him was that he was on his own. That wasn't... Don't! Rowan cut her off. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. Don't tell me I couldn't have known. I said those words. I abandoned him. And he died alone. Mara understood then. The isolation, the rigid routine, the refusal to hope. Rowan wasn't hiding on this mountain. He was serving a sentence. How long ago? She asked quietly. 12 years. And you've been up here for 7. He moved away from the window, back to the table. Took me 5 years to scrape together enough money to buy this land. Built the cabin myself over 2 years. Moved up permanently 3 years ago. And the brides? Loneliness is... He stopped, searched for words. It's corrosive. It eats you from the inside until you can't remember what it felt like to be whole. I thought maybe if someone else was here, it would stop. That I could... He laughed, bitter. But I can't even keep a woman here for more than 2 weeks. So that's my punishment too. Mara reached across the table and took his hand. Rowan froze. Stared at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. Your brother made his choice, Mara said. A bad choice, but his. You didn't pull that trigger. You didn't put him in that store. He did that. I abandoned him. You set a boundary. There's a difference. She squeezed his hand. And punishing yourself for 12 years doesn't bring him back. Doesn't change what happened. It just means you're dying too, slower and alone. Rowan pulled his hand away, but gently. Not rejection, just retreat. Why are you here, Mara? Really? You want the truth? Yeah. I owed money to people who don't accept late payments. Vegas money, the kind where they don't sue you, they just... She gestured vaguely. Disappear you. I had 3 options. Pay what I didn't have, run and look over my shoulder forever, or vanish so completely they'd never find me. So you chose a mountain. I chose survival. She met his eyes. Same as you, except you're surviving guilt and I'm surviving debt. But we're both here and we're both stuck. and the storm outside doesn't care about our reasons. Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, moved to the fireplace, added another log. When I listed that ad, I thought I needed someone to make this place less empty. But maybe, he paused, maybe I just needed someone who wouldn't run when things got hard. I'm not running. 7 women before you did. I'm not them. Mara stood, joined him by the fire. And you're not your brother, so maybe we stop punishing ourselves for things we can't change and start dealing with what's right in front of us. And what's that? A storm, animals that need feeding, a winter that's just getting started. She looked at him, and 2 people who are tired of being alone. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Not quite hope, but maybe the memory of what hope used to feel like. The storm's easing, he said quietly, looking toward the window. We should check the animals. All right. They bundled up again, went out into the dying wind. The snow had piled 3 feet high in places, but the worst was past. They checked the chickens, all fine, and the goats, hungry but healthy. Worked together in silence, but it was the good kind now, the kind that came from understanding. Walking back to the cabin, Mara slipped on ice. Rowan caught her before she fell, his arms solid around her waist, and for a moment they stood there in the snow, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough to feel his breath on her face. Careful, he said. I'm trying. He didn't let go immediately, neither did she. The moment stretched, fragile and strange, something unnamed passing between them. Then he stepped back, cleared his throat. Let's get inside. You're freezing. They went in, and the cabin felt different now, smaller, warmer, like something had changed in the spaces between words, in the silence that used to feel empty but now felt full. That night, Rowan cooked dinner for the first time since she'd arrived. Nothing fancy, stew from the cellar vegetables and dried venison, but he did it carefully, tasting as he went, adjusting seasonings. Served it with fresh bread he must have baked while she was organizing the pantry. They ate together at the table, and when their knees bumped underneath, neither pulled away. Thank you, Rowan said after they'd finished. For what? For staying. He looked at her directly, no shields. For not running when you saw who I really am. Same to you, Mara said softly. Outside, the storm finally died. The mountains settled into silence, deep and absolute. But inside the cabin, 2 people who'd been alone for too long sat together in firelight, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt like they were drowning. The wind had tested them. The isolation had pushed them. The confessions had stripped them bare. And they'd survived it, together. The morning after the storm broke clear and brutal. Mara woke to sunlight streaming through the loft window, so bright it hurt her eyes. She'd slept hard, the kind of sleep that came after emotional exhaustion, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then she heard the axe outside, steady, rhythmic strikes, and it all came back. She climbed down the ladder to find the cabin empty, fire banked low. Coffee sat in the pot, still warm. She poured a cup and stood at the window watching Rowan work. He'd cleared a path from the cabin to the animal shelter already, snow piled high on either side. Now he was attacking a fallen branch near the woodshed, muscles working under his flannel shirt, breath clouding in the cold air. He moved with purpose, no wasted motion, like the work itself was a kind of meditation. Mara pulled on her boots and coat and went outside. The cold hit hard, sharp enough to make her gasp, but the sun made up for it. Everything glittered, snow, ice, even the pine needles. Beautiful and deadly, she thought, like most things worth looking at. You're up, Rowan said without stopping his work. The axe came down, splitting the branch clean. Figured you'd sleep longer. Thought I'd help. Mara picked up the split pieces and carried them to the woodpile. What needs doing? He paused then, axe resting on the ground, and looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The 6 women before you. None of them ever asked that. Asked what? What needs doing? They'd wait for me to assign tasks, or they'd complain there was nothing to do, or they'd... He stopped himself. Doesn't matter. There's plenty to do. You sure you want to work? I'm sure. He nodded slowly. All right. We need to check the roof for damage, make sure the chimney's clear, inspect the solar panels. Then we feed the animals, check the water lines, reinforce the shelter door. Wind nearly tore it off. After that, we'll find more work, Mara finished. I get it. Winter up here isn't about surviving. It's about staying ahead of what's trying to kill you. Something like approval crossed Rowan's face. Yeah, that's exactly it. They worked through the morning without much talk, falling into a rhythm that felt older than the week they'd known each other. Rowan would start a task, Mara would figure out how to help, and together they'd get it done faster than either could alone. The roof was fine. The chimney needed minor cleaning. One solar panel had ice damage. Rowan swore quietly and made notes about ordering a replacement in spring. The animals were grateful for attention, especially the goats. One of them, a brown female with white patches, kept headbutting Mara's leg until she scratched behind its ears. That's Maggie, Rowan said. She's bossy. I like her. Mara laughed when Maggie tried to eat her coat sleeve. What are the others called? The black one's Pepper, the small one's Bean. He pointed to the chickens. Those are just the chickens, couldn't name them. Felt wrong since we eat their eggs. But you named the goats. Goats have personalities. Chickens are… He shrugged. Chickens? It was the most casual conversation they'd had, standing in a shelter that smelled like hay and animal warmth, and Mara realized she was smiling. Actually smiling, for the first time in months. Maybe longer. By afternoon, they'd finished the critical repairs and moved on to preparation work. Rowan showed her how to split kindling properly, how to stack wood so it dried efficiently, how to check the propane lines for leaks. He taught her to read the sky, not just for weather, but for the quality of light that meant a storm was coming versus just clouds passing through. You grew up in cities, he said while they were stacking wood. Statement, not question. Phoenix until I was 12. It was Vegas after that. This must be… He gestured at the mountains around them. Different. Different doesn't mean bad. Mara set another log on the pile. Cities are loud. Constant noise, constant movement. You'd think that means you're never alone, but… She paused, searching for words. You can be alone in a crowd. More alone than up here, actually. Rowan was quiet for a moment. I tried the city once, after Daniel died, before I came up here. Thought maybe if I was around people it would help. Spent 2 years in Billings, working construction, living in a studio apartment. And I'd wake up at 3 in the morning listening to sirens and car alarms and neighbors fighting through thin walls, and I'd feel like I was suffocating. He threw another log on the pile, harder than necessary. At least up here, when I can't breathe, it's honest. The mountain doesn't pretend to care about you. But the city pretends to? The city pretends everything matters, and nothing does. All at once. He looked at her. You know what I mean. She did. The casino where she'd worked, bright lights, constant noise, people everywhere. But every single person there was alone. Playing slots alone, drinking alone, losing money alone. Together in isolation. Yeah, Mara said quietly. I know exactly what you mean. They finished the woodpile as the sun started dropping toward the mountains. The temperature fell with it, fast and mean. Rowan checked the thermometer by the door and swore. Dropping to 10 tonight, maybe lower. He looked at the sky, assessing. We need to bring the goats inside. Inside the cabin. Inside the mudroom. There's space, and if it gets as cold as I think, they'll freeze in the shelter. He was already moving, grabbing rope and blankets. Come on. We don't have much time. Getting 3 goats across 50 feet of icy ground turned out to be harder than Mara expected. Maggie went willingly enough, but Pepper balked at the cabin door, and Bean simply sat down in the snow and refused to move. Rowan ended up carrying Bean while Mara pulled Pepper with a combination of rope and sheer stubborn determination. They set up the mudroom with hay bales and blankets, water buckets, and feed. The goats settled in, seemingly unbothered by the change in location. The chickens stayed in the shelter with extra insulation. Rowan said they were tougher than they looked. Will they be all right? Mara asked, watching him secure the shelter door. They've made it through worse, but his voice held doubt. Chickens are resilient until they're not. It's that kind of line. Inside, the cabin felt smaller with 3 goats in the mudroom, but warmer too. Mara cooked dinner while Rowan reinforced the door seals, stuffing gaps with rags and old newspaper. They ate quickly, tension building as the temperature dropped and the wind picked up again. "It's going to be a bad night," Rowan said, standing at the window. "I can feel it." He was right. By 8 o'clock, the wind was screaming. By 9, the cabin was shaking. Mara lay in the loft, listening to the structure groan under the assault, and wondered if this was how it would end. Buried under snow and splintered wood, frozen 8,000 feet up a mountain nobody knew she was on. "Mara," Rowan's voice cut through the wind. "You awake?" "Yeah." "Come down here." She climbed down to find him sitting by the fire, feeding it log after log. The flames threw wild shadows on the walls. He'd pulled the couch closer to the hearth, piled it with blankets. "If this gets worse, we need to stay warm," he said without looking at her. "Conserve body heat. It's just practical." Mara understood what he wasn't saying, that pride and privacy were luxuries they couldn't afford if the temperature kept dropping. That survival meant compromise. "All right," she said, and sat down next to him. They stayed there through the night, feeding the fire, listening to the storm try to tear the world apart. Sometimes they talked. Small things, memories that didn't hurt too much. Rowan told her about learning to hunt with his grandfather, the old man's patience teaching him to read tracks and sign. Mara told him about her mother, who died when she was 19, and how she'd spent the last 10 years trying to fill that absence with anything that would fit. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat close enough to share warmth, and that was okay too. Around 3 in the morning, something crashed outside, loud enough to wake the goats, who started bleating in panic. Rowan was on his feet instantly, grabbing his coat. "Stay here." Like hell. Mara pulled on her boots. "You're not going out there alone." "Mara, we've had this argument already. I'm coming." He looked at her, jaw tight, then nodded once. "Stay close. Don't let go of the safety line." There was a rope system Mara hadn't noticed before, tied to the cabin and running to the shelter. Rowan clipped them both to it before opening the door. The wind nearly ripped it from his hands. Snow drove horizontal, blinding. They pushed forward, following the rope, and Mara thought about people who died 10 feet from their houses in storms like this, disoriented and frozen. The shelter roof had partially collapsed. "Shit!" Rowan was already moving, pulling debris away from where the chickens huddled in terrified silence. "Help me clear this." They worked fast, ignoring the cold, ignoring the wind. 2 chickens were dead, crushed by falling timber. The other 4 were alive but traumatized. Rowan gathered them carefully, tucking them inside his coat while Mara salvaged what feed she could. Getting back to the cabin was harder. The wind had shifted, coming at them from a different angle, and the rope was their only anchor to reality. Mara's hands went numb on the line. Her face hurt from the cold. She couldn't feel her feet. Then Rowan's hand found hers, solid and warm despite the gloves, and squeezed once. "Keep going. We're close." They stumbled through the cabin door together, falling more than walking, and Rowan kicked it shut behind them. For a long moment, they just lay there on the floor, breathing hard, while the goats watched with what might have been judgment. "Never," Rowan gasped. "Never again. You're not going out in a storm." "We both went," Mara managed. "That's the deal." He laughed then, breathless and a little wild. "You're insane. You know that?" Says the man who lives alone on a mountain. Fair point. They got the surviving chickens settled in the mudroom with the goats. Unlikely roommates, but desperate times, and stripped off their wet clothes. Mara's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't work the buttons. Rowan's weren't much better. "Here." He helped her with the coat, fingers clumsy but patient. His touch was careful, impersonal, focused on getting her warm rather than anything else. But when his hand brushed her neck checking for ice, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. They ended up back on the couch, wrapped in every blanket they owned, close enough that she could count his heartbeats. Outside, the storm continued, but inside they had fire and walls and each other. "You could have died out there," Rowan said quietly. "Because I had to check on chickens." "They're not just chickens. They're yours." Mara shifted to look at him. And I didn't die. Neither did you. This time. You can't live your whole life afraid of next time. She said it gently, but firmly. Your brother, Daniel, what happened to him wasn't because you failed to protect him. It was because he made a choice you couldn't control. And these storms, this mountain, they're not punishments. They're just weather. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's true. She reached up, touched his face, rough with several days of beard growth, cold from the storm. You're allowed to want to live, Rowan, not just survive. Actually, live. He caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. His eyes were dark in the firelight, full of things he couldn't or wouldn't say. Then he pulled back, gentle but definite. Get some sleep, he said. We'll have work in the morning. Rowan, please. Just that word, quiet and raw. Please, just let it be enough that you're here. So Mara let it go, settled back into the blankets, and eventually slept. But she felt it, the shift, the thing building between them that neither was ready to name. Not yet, maybe not ever. But it was there. The next morning brought clear skies and assessment of damage. The shelter would need a complete roof rebuild. 2 chickens lost, 4 traumatized. The solar panels had taken more damage. One of the water lines had frozen and cracked. It's fine, Rowan kept saying as they cataloged problems. It's all fixable. But his hand shook slightly while he wrote the list, and Mara recognized the signs, the weight of it all, the mountain, the isolation, the constant battle against elements that didn't care if you lived or died. It was wearing him down. Show me how to fix the water line, she said. He looked up, surprised. What? The water line. Show me how to fix it. Then show me how to repair the shelter roof and the solar panels. Show me all of it. She met his eyes. If something happens to you, I need to know how to maintain this place. And you need to know you're not carrying it alone anymore. Something in his expression cracked, not broke. Cracked, like ice starting to thaw. Why are you doing this? Because I'm here. Because you need help. Because... She paused, choosing words carefully. Because for the first time in years, I'm somewhere that feels like it might become home. And I protect home. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then he handed her the notebook and pen. All right, write this down. They spent the next week in intense education. Rowan taught her everything, how to splice water lines, how to read the solar panel output, how to maintain the propane system, how to preserve food, how to trap small game, how to navigate by landmarks when the trails were buried. He showed her his emergency caches scattered around the property, supplies hidden in weatherproof containers in case the cabin became inaccessible. Paranoid, he admitted, but it's kept me alive. Not paranoid, Mara corrected. Prepared. She learned to shoot, which was harder than movies made it look. The rifle kicked like a mule and her shoulder bruised purple, but by the end of the week she could hit a target at 50 yards. Not great, but adequate. Good enough, Rowan said, watching her practice. In an emergency, good enough is all you need. They rebuilt the shelter roof together, working in the cold until their hands were raw. Mara learned to read wood grain, to place nails properly, to trust her strength. The work was hard and her back ached and splinters embedded in her palms, but there was satisfaction in it, creating something solid from chaos. The surviving chickens began laying again. The goats returned to the shelter once it was secured. Maggie still headbutted Mara's leg every morning, demanding attention. She likes you, Rowan observed one morning while they fed the animals. The feeling's mutual. The other women were scared of the goats, thought they were dirty or mean. He scratched Pepper behind the ears. But animals are honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not. Unlike people, Mara thought. Unlike both of us. That night, sitting at dinner, Rowan asked the question she'd been waiting for. The people you owed money to in Vegas, they ever gonna find you? Mara set down her fork. I was careful. Used cash only for months before I left. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Didn't leave a trail. She met his eyes. But careful doesn't mean impossible. If they want to find me badly enough, eventually they will. How much did you owe? $43,000. Rowan whistled low. Casino debt? Loan sharks. My mother got sick, needed treatment. Insurance covered some, but not enough. I borrowed money to cover the rest. Mara's voice stayed level, factual. She died anyway, and the interest on 40,000 at 30% compounds fast. You tried to pay it back? For 2 years. Every spare dollar. But I was working minimum wage, living in Vegas where rent eats half your paycheck. I'd pay down 1,000, they'd add 2 in interest and fees. She laughed, bitter. It was designed to be unpayable. That's the point. They don't want the money. They want the leverage. So you ran. So I chose to live. She looked at him directly. Same as you did when you came up here. We're both running from things that wanted to destroy us. Difference is, your thing was guilt. Mine has a name and an address. Rowan was quiet for a long time, turning his coffee cup in his hands. Finally he said, If they come here, I won't let them take you. Rowan, I mean it. His voice was flat, absolute. This is my land, my home, and you're... He stopped, jaw working. You're part of it now. So if they come, they'll have to go through me. Mara felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. You can't fight loan sharks with a rifle and good intentions. Watch me. I'm serious. They're not reasonable people. They'll kill you without thinking twice. Then they better be good shots. He met her eyes, unflinching. Because I've got nothing left to lose except this place and what's in it, and I'm tired of losing. The weight of those words settled between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to unpack. Outside, the wind picked up again. Not storm wind, just the constant presence of weather that never stopped testing the cabin's defenses. Why? Mara asked quietly. Why does it matter if I stay or go? Rowan stood, walked to the fire, stared into the flames. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because for 7 years, I've lived up here alone. Convinced myself I deserved it. That isolation was my penance. Then 6 women came and left, and each time it confirmed what I already believed. That I was too broken for human connection, that I'd poisoned something fundamental in myself. He turned to look at her. But then you showed up. And you didn't run when I was silent. You didn't leave when the storms hit. You didn't flinch when I told you about Daniel, about the guilt, about the ways I'm damaged. His hands clenched at his sides. You looked at all of it and stayed anyway. Do you know how rare that is? Mara's throat tightened. I'm not special, Rowan. You're stubborn. You're strong. You don't quit when things get hard. He moved closer, stopped just short of touching distance. And you make me think maybe I'm not as broken as I thought. That maybe there's still something in me worth... He stopped, shook his head. I don't know how to say this right. Then don't say it. Mara stood, closed the distance between them. Just be here. With me. That's enough. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's warmth, and the moment stretched between them like something alive. Rowan's hand came up, hesitated, then touched her face, tentative, like he'd forgotten how to be gentle with another person. I'm afraid, he said quietly, that you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake coming here, that this isn't what you wanted. I'm afraid too, Mara admitted, that I'll mess this up somehow, that I'll bring my problems to your door and ruin the only good thing I've found in years. So we're both terrified. Yeah, but you're still here. Still here. Rowan leaned forward, pressed his forehead against hers. Not a kiss, just contact. Human and real, and more intimate than anything Mara had felt in longer than she could remember. Whatever happens, he said, we face it together. Deal? Deal. They stood there while the fire burned down and the night deepened, and something fundamental shifted in the cabin. It wasn't love. Too soon for that. Too complicated by their respective damages. But it was connection, real and chosen, and that was enough. For now, it was more than enough. 3 weeks after that night by the fire, Mara woke to the sound of something wrong. Not storm wrong or animal wrong, but a different kind of wrong. The absence of sound where there should be rhythm. She lay in the loft, listening, and realized what was missing. Rowan's breathing, the creak of the couch when he shifted in sleep, the small noises of another person existing in shared space. She climbed down the ladder fast, heart hammering, and found the cabin empty. His coat was gone. Boots gone. The rifle still hung above the door, but the handgun he kept in the lockbox was missing. The note was on the table, weighted down with a coffee mug. Tracking something. Back by noon. Don't follow. R. Mara checked the clock, 6 in the morning. She made coffee with shaking hands and tried not to think about all the ways a man could die alone in these mountains. Tried not to remember that she'd known him barely 2 months, that he didn't owe her explanations or safety, that she had no right to this fear clawing at her ribs. But the fear didn't care about rights. By 8 o'clock, she'd fed the animals, checked the water lines, reorganized the pantry twice. By 10, she was pacing. By 11, she had her coat on and was studying the trail markers Rowan had shown her, trying to decide if "don't follow" was a suggestion or a command. He came through the door at 11:30, covered in blood. Mara's breath stopped. What happened? Not mine. Rowan set down a pack that clanked metallically. Found a poacher's trap line, steel jaw traps, illegal as hell. Caught a deer, still alive when I got there. His face was drawn, exhausted. Had to put it down. Couldn't leave it suffering. The blood. Field dressed it. Meat's in the pack. Couldn't let it go to waste. He stripped off his coat, hands moving mechanically. I hate those traps. They don't kill clean, just hold and hurt until something bigger comes along to finish the job. Mara recognized the anger in his voice, the way it covered something deeper. You've dealt with poachers before. 3 times in 7 years. They come up here thinking nobody's watching, that they can take whatever they want without consequences. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I called it in to the rangers. They'll patrol, maybe catch whoever set the line. But probably not. These guys know the mountains. Did you spring the other traps? All 6 of them. He looked at her then, really looked. You were worried. You left before dawn to track something dangerous without telling me where you were going. Of course I was worried. The note said you'd be back by noon. It's 11:30. That gave me 2.5 hours to imagine every possible way you could die out there. Mara's voice came out sharper than she intended. So yeah, I was worried. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he moved closer, touched her shoulder, brief but deliberate. I'm sorry. I'm not used to someone caring if I come back. The honesty of it diffused her anger. Well, get used to it, because I do care. And next time you go tracking something, you wake me up and tell me first. Deal. He glanced at the blood-soaked pack. Help me process this meat. It'll take most of the day, but we'll have venison for months. They worked together in the cold room, butchering the deer with knives Rowan kept sharp enough to split hair. He showed her how to separate muscle groups, how to trim fat and silver skin, how to recognize the cuts worth keeping versus the parts better ground or stewed. It was messy, cold work, and Mara's hands cramped within an hour, but there was something honest about it. No pretense, no waste, just using what the mountain provided. My grandfather taught me this, Rowan said, wrapping a backstrap in butcher paper. Said if you're going to kill something, you honor it by using every part you can. Otherwise, you're just destroying for the sake of it. Smart man. He was. Died when I was 16. Rowan's knife paused. Heart attack while he was checking his trap line. They found him 2 days later, frozen. He taught me to hunt, to track, to survive out here. But he couldn't teach me how to live with... He stopped himself. With what? With the weight of it. The isolation, the quiet. He resumed cutting. He had my grandmother. They'd been married 40 years when he died. She followed him 6 months later. Couldn't stand being alone after all that time together. His hands stilled. I used to think that was weak. Now I understand it better. Mara set down her knife. Rowan, I'm not saying... He struggled with the words. I'm not trying to put pressure on you or make this into something it's not. Before you came here, I thought I was fine with alone. Convinced myself I preferred it. But now... He looked at her across the butchered deer, eyes dark and honest. Now alone feels like dying slowly, and I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it. Mara's chest felt tight. We're both here. That's enough to start with. Is it? For you? She thought about Las Vegas. about the desperate choices that had brought her here, about the fact that she'd expected this to be temporary, a place to hide until she figured out her next move. But somewhere in the storms and shared work and quiet evenings by the fire, temporary had started feeling permanent. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It's enough." They finished processing the meat in silence, but it was comfortable now, the kind of quiet that came from understanding rather than absence. By evening, they had steaks and roasts wrapped in the cold room, ground meat for sausage, bones for stock, waist trimmed to almost nothing. "Thank you," Rowan said as they cleaned the knives, "for helping, for—" He gestured vaguely. "All of it. That's the deal, remember? Partners." Partners. He tested the word like it was foreign. "I like the sound of that." That night they cooked fresh venison, the first truly good meat either had tasted in weeks. Rowan opened a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving, poured 2 fingers for each of them. They sat by the fire, eating and drinking, and for a while it felt almost normal, like they were regular people having dinner, not 2 broken souls hiding on a mountain. "Tell me something good," Mara said after her second whiskey. The alcohol had loosened something in her chest, made the cabin feel warmer. "About before your brother, before you came up here. Something you liked about your life." Rowan stared into his glass, thinking. "I worked construction. Summer after high school, I got hired on a crew building houses. Nothing fancy, tract homes in a development, but I liked it. The way something could be nothing but dirt and stakes one week, and 4 months later, it's a house where people will live, raise kids, have Christmases." He paused. There was this moment, right before we'd hand over the keys to the new owners. We'd walk through one last time, checking everything, and the house would be completely empty. No furniture, no people, just space and potential. I loved that moment, all the lives that could happen there. "Why didn't you keep doing it?" "After Daniel died, I couldn't stand building things for other people. Felt, I don't know, wrong. Like I didn't deserve to create homes when I'd destroyed mine." He drained his glass. "So I stopped. Drifted for a while. Then came here and built one house. Just one. For myself." "But you built it well," Mara observed, looking around the solid cabin. "This place could last 100 years. That was the idea. If I was going to sentence myself to isolation, at least the prison would be sturdy." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Your turn. Something good from before." Mara thought back through the years of Las Vegas, the casino lights, the desperate faces, the slow grind of trying and failing. But before that, there was Phoenix. Before her mother got sick. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said. "Elementary school, maybe 2nd or 3rd grade. I like kids. Liked the idea of helping them figure things out. I was taking classes at community college, working toward a degree." She swirled her whiskey. "Then Mom got her diagnosis and everything else stopped mattering. I dropped out, got a job that paid immediately, and that was that. No more school. No more plans." "You regret it?" "Sometimes. But what's the alternative? Let her die alone because I wanted to sit in classrooms?" Mara shook her head. "You do what you have to do. Regret's a luxury." Harsh way to see it. Realistic way to see it. She looked at him. "You think if you could go back, you'd do anything different with Daniel?" Rowan's face went carefully blank. "I think about it every day. The argument we had, I'd take it back. The things I said, I'd swallow them. But would it have changed anything? Would he have listened? Probably not. He was determined to make his own mistakes." His jaw tightened. "But at least he'd have died knowing I loved him." He knew. "You can't know that." "Yeah, I can. Because brothers don't raise each other without love. It's the only thing that makes that kind of sacrifice make sense." Mara leaned forward. "He knew, Rowan. And if he were here right now, he'd tell you to stop punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault." "You don't know what he'd say." "I know what anyone who loved you would say. They'd say you've served enough time, that 7 years alone on a mountain is enough penance for words you can't take back." She reached across the space between them, took his hand. "I know because if I died tomorrow, I wouldn't want you spending the rest of your life up here alone, convinced you didn't deserve anything better." Rowan stared at their joined hands. "You're not dying tomorrow." "Probably not, But if I did, if something happened, would you let yourself move on? Don't. His voice went rough. Don't make me think about that. Why not? Because he stopped, then said it anyway. Because you're the first thing in 7 years that's made me want to stay alive for more than just stubbornness. And the idea of losing that, he pulled his hand away, stood abruptly. I need air. He grabbed his coat and went outside, leaving Mara alone by the fire with questions she didn't know how to answer. She found him 10 minutes later, standing at the edge of the clearing, staring up at stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. The temperature had dropped below 0, but he didn't seem to notice. I'm sorry, Mara said, coming to stand beside him. I pushed too hard. No, you're right. I can't. He stopped, started again. For 7 years, I've been half dead. Going through motions, maintaining this place, existing but not living. Then you showed up, and suddenly I'm terrified all the time because there's something to lose again. He looked at her. That's not your fault, but it's the truth. I'm scared too, Mara admitted. Every day I wake up and think maybe this is when it falls apart. When you realize I'm not worth the complication. When my past catches up and destroys what we're building. When, her voice cracked, when I prove I'm just as broken as you think you are. I don't think you're broken. Then you're not looking hard enough. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. I ran away from my debts instead of facing them. I abandoned everything I knew because it was easier than fighting. I'm a coward, Rowan. At least you stayed and dealt with your guilt. I just ran. Running isn't cowardice. Sometimes it's survival. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, still warm from his body heat. And you didn't run from everything. You came here. You stayed through the storms. You learned to split wood and shoot and butcher meat. That's not cowardice. That's adaptation. Or desperation. What's the difference? He smiled slightly. Half of survival is just desperation that worked out. Despite everything, Mara laughed. Is that mountain wisdom? That's 7 years of figuring things out the hard way. He touched her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. You're not broken, Mara. You're just... He searched for the word. Dented. Like me. But dented things still work. Sometimes they work better because they've been tested. She leaned into his touch, cold nose against warm palm. What are we doing here, Rowan? Surviving. Together. He pulled her closer, arms around her, and she fit against him like they'd been designed that way. Is that enough? For now. They stood there in the freezing darkness, holding each other against the cold, and Mara thought about the difference between surviving and living, about whether it was possible to do both at once, about whether she was brave enough to try. The mountain didn't offer answers. It just watched, patient and ancient, while two people tried to figure out how to be human together. Later that night, back inside with the fire built up and whiskey warming their blood, they sat close on the couch and Rowan asked, what would you do if you could go back to Vegas? If the debt was gone, if you were safe, would you go back? Mara thought about it honestly. 6 months ago, I would have said yes. Vegas was all I knew, but now... She looked around the cabin at the rough wood and stone, at the books and tools and evidence of life deliberately built. Now I don't think I could go back to that noise, that chaos. Cities make you forget how to hear yourself think. So you'd stay up here? If I could, if... She hesitated. If there was a reason to. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I built this place for one, but it could work for two if... He stopped, jaw tight. If that was something you wanted. Are you asking me to stay permanently? I'm saying the option exists. When the year's up, when the trial period ends, you don't have to leave. You could... He struggled with it. This could be home, if you wanted. Mara's throat tightened. And if my past shows up, if those people from Vegas find me, then we deal with it, together. His hand found hers. I told you before, they'll have to go through me. I meant it. You can't fight loan sharks with good intentions. Maybe not, but I can make this place defensible. I can teach you to shoot better. I can... He stopped, then said it anyway. I can protect what's mine, and you're... The word caught. You're mine now, if you want to be. It wasn't romantic. There was no poetry, no grand gesture, just a damaged man offering what protection he could to a woman who'd learned not to expect rescue. But it was real, and that mattered more than pretty words ever could. Yeah, Mara said quietly. I want to be. He pulled her closer, and she rested her head against his shoulder, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. Outside, the wind picked up, testing the cabin's defenses like it did every night. But inside, they had fire and walls and each other, and for now that was enough. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together on the couch, and neither dreamed of running. The next morning brought new snow and new routines. They worked together with an ease that felt earned rather than given, moving around each other in the cabin's small space without collision. Mara cooked breakfast while Rowan checked the animals. He split wood while she mended clothes. They took turns reading aloud from his collection of books, classics mostly, the kind of stories that lasted because they told truths about being human. A week passed, then another. January hit hard, temperatures dropping so low the windows frosted on the inside despite the fire. They burned through wood faster than anticipated. Rowan spent long days cutting more, dragging logs through snow that was waist-deep in places. Mara helped when she could, learning to read trees, which ones were dead enough to take, which needed to stay. We're going through supplies faster than I planned, Rowan admitted one night, reviewing his inventory sheets. I usually stock for one person, with buffer for emergencies. 2 people eating changes the math. How bad? Not critical yet. But if we get a late spring, if the roads don't clear until May, he ran calculations in his head. We'll be on rations by April. What are the options? Hope for an early thaw, or, he hesitated, or I could ski down to the supply depot in Miller's Creek. It's 15 miles, but doable. Stock up on essentials while we can still make the trip. When would you go? Soon, before the next storm system hits. He looked at her. It means leaving you alone for maybe 2 days. 1 to get there, 1 to get back. You'd have to maintain the fire, feed the animals, handle anything that comes up. I can do that? I know you can, but I don't like leaving you. He said it simple, factual. Anything could happen. Anything could happen when we're both here. Mara closed the inventory book. If we need supplies, you go get them. I'll be fine. You sure? Positive, just... She managed a smile. Come back. Always, he said, and meant it. He left 2 days later, before dawn, with a pack full of empty bags and a list of necessary items. The goodbye was awkward. They stood at the door, both wanting to say more than they knew how to express, settling finally on a brief hug, and Rowan's gruff, "Take care of my goats." "They're half mine now," Mara shot back. "Fair enough?" Then he was gone, skis cutting through fresh snow, and Mara was alone on the mountain for the first time since she'd arrived. The silence was different without him, bigger, more aware. She went through the morning routine mechanically, stoked the fire, made coffee, fed the animals. Maggie seemed to sense Rowan's absence and headbutted Mara more insistently than usual, looking for reassurance. "He'll be back," Mara told the goat. 2 days. Maggie didn't look convinced. The first day passed slowly but without incident. Mara kept busy, cooked, cleaned, read, checked systems. She found herself gravitating to Rowan's side of the cabin, touching his things like they were talismans. His extra coat hanging by the door. The book he'd been reading, bookmark holding his place. The coffee mug he always used with the chip on the rim. Night fell early and complete. Mara built up the fire and tried to read, but her attention kept drifting to the windows, to the darkness pressing against the glass. The mountain felt different without Rowan's presence anchoring her to it. More hostile. Like it was waiting for her to fail so it could prove she didn't belong. She was reaching for another log when she heard it. Scratching. Not wind, not branches. Something with claws moving along the cabin's exterior wall. Mara froze, listening. The sound came again, deliberate, testing, looking for weakness. She grabbed the rifle from above the door, hands shaking as she checked the chamber. Loaded. Safety off. She'd practiced this, knew the mechanics, but practicing on targets was different from facing something real. The scratching moved to the door, then to the window, then silence. Mara waited, heart hammering, rifle raised. Minutes passed. Nothing. She was starting to think she'd imagined it when glass shattered in the cold room. The bear came through the window in an explosion of wood and snow and rage. Mara didn't think. Thinking would have frozen her, would have let the bear get between her and survival. She moved on instinct, rifle coming up as the massive shape crashed through the cold room doorway into the main cabin. The animal was huge, maybe 400 pounds, fur matted with ice and desperation. Starving, she realized. Winter thin and mean with hunger. The first shot went high, punching through the wall above the bear's head. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and the bear recoiled, confused by the noise. Mara pumped the bolt action, chambered another round, aimed lower. The second shot caught the bear in the shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to make it scream. A sound that wasn't animal or human, but something worse, pure pain given voice. Blood sprayed across the floor as the bear staggered, then surged forward with renewed fury. Mara backed toward the fireplace, pumping the bolt again. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the rifle. The bear was between her and the door now, blocking the only exit. Its eyes were black and empty, reflecting firelight like coins at the bottom of a well. She fired again. Missed. The bullet buried itself in the doorframe. The bear charged. Mara dove sideways, hitting the floor hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. The bear's claws raked the spot where she'd been standing, gouging wood. She rolled, came up with the rifle, fired from her hip. This time the shot hit center mass, and the bear roared, stumbling. But it didn't go down. How many shots did she have left? She'd loaded 5 rounds, fired 4. 1 left. 1 bullet between her and being torn apart. The bear turned toward her, breathing hard. Blood matted its fur, dripped onto the floor Rowan kept so clean. In its eyes she saw no malice, no evil. Just hunger and pain and the desperate drive to survive that made animals do terrible things. She understood that drive, had lived it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and fired the last round. The bullet took the bear in the throat. It went down heavy, shaking the cabin's floor, and made a sound like wet breathing. Then it was still. Mara stood there, rifle empty, watching blood pool across the boards. Her ears rang from the gunshots. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The bear's dead eyes stared at nothing, and she thought about Rowan saying a fed bear is a dead bear, about how the mountain didn't care if you deserved to live, only if you were strong enough to keep doing it. The goats were screaming in the mudroom. The chickens had gone silent, either dead from shock or too terrified to make noise. And Mara was alone with a dead bear in a cabin that suddenly felt too small to contain everything that had just happened. She set down the rifle carefully, like it might explode, walked to the door and opened it, letting in cold air that burned her lungs but cleared her head. Outside, the night was vast and indifferent, stars burning like they'd burned before humans existed and would keep burning after. She stood there until her teeth chattered, until the cold cut through the adrenaline, until her hand steadied. Then she went back inside and looked at what she'd killed. The bear had destroyed the cold room, the window completely shattered, shelves knocked over, meat scattered across the floor. It had been after the venison, she realized, had smelled blood and food and broken through glass to get to it, starving enough to risk humans, to break its own fundamental rules about survival. She couldn't move it alone. The thing weighed more than 3 times what she did, and dead weight was harder to shift than living. So she did what she could, closed the door between the cold room and the main cabin, stuffed towels against the gap to keep the cold air out, checked the animals, goats traumatized but unharmed, chickens in shock but alive. Built up the fire because the broken window was letting in freezing air that would kill her as surely as the bear's claws if she let it. Then she sat down at the table and started shaking so hard her teeth rattled. The fear came late, after the danger had passed, and it was worse for the delay. She saw the bear charging in her mind, over and over, felt the rifle kick against her shoulder, heard the wet sound of bullets hitting flesh, smelled blood and gunpowder and her own terror sweat. Her hands cramped from gripping the rifle so hard, knuckles bruised purple. She'd killed something, taken a life to save her own. The bear had been starving, desperate, not evil, just an animal trying to survive winter like everything else on this mountain, and she'd shot it 5 times until it stopped moving. Mara put her head on the table and cried, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere below her lungs, from the place where you stored all the fear and pain you couldn't afford to feel while you were surviving. She cried for the bear, for herself, for the violence it took to stay alive. Cried until her throat was raw, and her eyes burned and she had nothing left inside except empty. Then she dried her face, stood up, and got to work. The broken window needed covering. She found plywood in the workshop, nails and hammer, worked by lantern light to seal the gap. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold until Rowan got back. The blood on the floor needed cleaning. She used snow to scrub it, cold water and soap, working on her knees until her hands were raw. The venison needed salvaging. Some of it was ruined, trampled, or contaminated, but most could be saved. She wrapped it in fresh paper, moved it to the main cabin where she could guard it. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking gray and cold through the windows. She'd been up all night. Her body ached, her shoulder throbbed where the rifle had kicked, but the cabin was secure, the animals fed, the immediate crisis handled. She made coffee and sat by the fire, rifle reloaded and resting across her knees, and waited for Rowan to come home. He made it back by mid-morning, pulling a sled loaded with supplies, and stopped dead when he saw the boarded window. Mara watched from the door as his eyes took in the damage, the fresh nails, the way the wood didn't quite fit. He dropped the sled's rope and ran the last 50 feet. What happened? His hands were on her face, turning her head, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Mara, talk to me. I'm fine. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. But we have a problem in the cold room. She led him inside and showed him the bear. Rowan stood there, staring at the dead animal, at the blood still staining the floor despite her scrubbing, at the shattered window and scattered supplies. Then he turned to her, face white. You shot it. 5 times. Mara's hands were shaking again. It came through the window last night, after the meet. I didn't know what else to do. 5 times. He looked at her, then at the bear, then back at her. You killed a 400-pound black bear with a bolt-action rifle while you were alone in a cabin. I didn't have a choice. I know that. He pulled her into his arms, hard enough that she felt his heart hammering against her cheek. You could have died. If you'd missed. If you'd panicked. If anything had gone different. But it didn't. Mara pressed her face against his coat, breathing in wood smoke and cold air, and the familiar smell of him. I did what you taught me. Aimed center mass, kept shooting until it stopped. You're shaking. I've been shaking since it happened. She pulled back to look at him. I killed it, Rowan. I know it was self-defense. I know I didn't have a choice, but I still... Her voice cracked. I can still see its eyes. He held her while she shook, one hand in her hair, the other tight around her waist. It's okay. You're okay. It's over. Is it? She looked up at him. Because it doesn't feel over. First time you take a life, it never feels over. His voice was rough. Even when it's necessary, even when it's you or them, that weight doesn't leave. How do you live with it? You just do. Day by day until it's not the first thing you think about when you wake up, until you can look at what you did and know it was right, even if it doesn't feel right. He kissed her forehead, brief and gentle. But you did good. You survived. That's what matters. They spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath. Rowan examined the bear, determined it was a male, probably 6 or 7 years old, starving because it had woken from hibernation too early. Something had disturbed it. Maybe other predators, maybe human activity in its territory. And once awake, it couldn't generate enough body heat to go back to sleep. So it had stayed active, burning calories it couldn't replace, growing desperate. Not your fault, Rowan said, skinning the animal with practiced efficiency. When they wake up early, they're already dead. They just don't know it yet. You ended it faster than starvation would have. They salvaged what they could, hide for tanning, some meat that hadn't spoiled, claws and teeth that Rowan said could be sold or traded. The rest they dragged a quarter mile from the cabin and left for scavengers. Circle of life, Mara thought. One animal's death feeding dozens of others. We need to reinforce the cold room, Rowan said that evening, studying the damage. Double pane the window, add metal shutters, and we're building a proper meat cache outside. Elevated, bear-proof. Should have done it years ago. Why didn't you? Because I was alone and lazy and figured if a bear got my meat, that was just the mountain's tax. He looked at her. But I'm not alone anymore. And I'll be damned if I'm letting anything else come through that window. They worked on reinforcements over the next week, building with an intensity that had nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with exercising fear. Rowan showed her how to construct a proper cache, 12 feet off the ground, accessible only by ladder, wrapped in metal sheeting that claws couldn't grip. They moved all the meat there, along with other supplies that might attract animals. If something wants it bad enough, it'll find a way, Rowan admitted. But we've made it hard enough that most things will look elsewhere. Most things. Nothing's perfect. You just do what you can and hope it's enough. The nightmares started 3 days after the attack. Mara would wake gasping, phantom claws raking her ribs, the bear's dead eyes staring from the dark. She'd climb down from the loft to find Rowan already awake, feeding the fire, and he'd make space for her on the couch without asking questions. They'd sit together until dawn, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in shared silence. Does it get better? She asked one night. Eventually, but it changes you. He stared into the fire. Taking a life, even in animals, even in self-defense, it marks you. Makes you understand how thin the line is between living and dying, how close we all are to violence when survival's on the line. I hate that I understand it now. I know, but understanding it means you'll do what's necessary next time. He looked at her. And there will be a next time. Maybe not bears, maybe not anything dramatic, but the mountain tests you constantly. Small tests, mostly. Can you keep the fire going? Can you mend your clothes? Can you stay sane in the silence? But sometimes, he gestured at the boarded window, sometimes the test is bigger. And I passed. With flying colors. He reached over, took her hand. I'm proud of you, and He stopped, jaw working. I'm sorry I wasn't here. You couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. I left you alone and you almost died because of it. His grip tightened. That can't happen again. Rowan, you can't be here every second. That's not realistic. Then we make it realistic. We don't take unnecessary risks. We don't separate unless we absolutely have to. He struggled with it. We take care of each other. That's the deal now. Mara understood what he wasn't saying, that the bear had terrified him more than her because he'd been 15 miles away and helpless. That coming home to find blood and damage had cracked something in his carefully maintained defenses. That he was as scared of losing her as she was of dying. Okay, she said quietly. We take care of each other. February arrived with more snow and colder temperatures. They settled into new routines, adjusted to the changes the bear attack had forced. Mara got better at shooting, practicing until she could hit targets consistently at 100 yards. Rowan taught her to track, to read sign in snow, to know when something was watching from the trees. You're becoming mountain folk, he said one afternoon, watching her skin a rabbit she'd trapped. City girl couldn't have done this 3 months ago. City girl couldn't have done a lot of things 3 months ago. Mara worked the knife carefully, separating hide from muscle. I'm not sure I recognize her anymore. You miss her? Sometimes she had running water and electricity and didn't have to worry about bears breaking into her house. Mara smiled slightly, but she was also broke and desperate and running from people who wanted to hurt her, so maybe this version is better. Even with the violence, the fear, even with that. Because at least here, I know what I'm fighting. In Vegas, the threats were invisible. Debt accumulating while I slept, interest compounding, danger growing in spreadsheets I never saw. She set aside the hide. Here, if something wants to kill me, it shows up. Teeth and claws. Honest. Honest, Rowan repeated. That's one way to describe it. They cooked the rabbit that night, and it was good. Gamey, but tender. They were eating better than Mara had in years, even with the rationing. Venison, rabbit, grouse, when they could shoot them. Eggs from the surviving chickens, milk from the goats. Food that tasted like work, an earned reward. Tell me about the supplies you got in town, Mara said over dinner. What'd you trade for them? Cash, mostly. I've got savings, enough to last years if I'm careful. He paused. But I also sold some of the furniture I made. There's a store in Miller's Creek that takes handcrafted stuff. Sold 3 chairs and a table. Got decent money for them. You make furniture? In the workshop. Gives me something to do in winter when I can't work outside. He looked almost embarrassed. It's not fancy, just functional stuff. Tables, chairs, shelves. But I'm good at it. Learned from my grandfather. Can I see? He hesitated, then nodded. After dinner, he took her to the workshop, a space she'd been in before but never really examined. And there, in the lantern light, she saw what he'd made. A rocking chair, smooth and perfect. Bookshelves with dovetail joints. A child's cradle, sanded, silk soft. Rowan. She touched the cradle, stunned by the craftsmanship. This is beautiful. Made it years ago. Thought. He stopped himself. Doesn't matter what I thought. Nobody's using it. But Mara understood what he wouldn't say. That he'd made it hoping for a future that included family, hoping one of the brides would stay long enough to fill it. That it sat here unused, a monument to hope abandoned. Maybe someday, she said quietly. He looked at her sharply. What? Maybe someday someone will use it. She met his eyes. Things change. Futures happen even when you're not planning them. Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then he reached out, pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Not sexual, just tender. The kind of touch that meant more than desire. That said, I see you and I'm glad you're here. Maybe, he said against her hair. Maybe someday. They stood there in the workshop, surrounded by furniture built for futures not yet realized. And Mara thought about the choices that had brought her here. The debt, the desperation, the ad on a website for people with nowhere else to go. At the time, it had felt like surrender, giving up on the life she'd wanted for a life she could tolerate. But now, standing in Rowan's arms while wind rattled the workshop walls, it felt more like arrival, like every bad choice and desperate measure had been leading here, to this mountain and this man and this moment of quiet understanding. I'm glad I came here, she said. Yeah? Yeah. Even with the bears and the cold and the constant threat of death, she smiled against his chest. This is the first place that's felt like home since my mom died. His arms tightened. It's home for me too now, because of you. They stayed like that until the lantern burned low, then went back to the cabin and sat by the fire until sleep took them. And for the first time since the bear attack, Mara slept through the night without nightmares. The next morning brought discovery. Mara was checking the cache, making sure everything was secure, when she noticed tracks in the fresh snow. Not bear tracks. Human. Boot prints, large, leading from the tree line to within 50 feet of the cabin before retreating. She called Rowan immediately. He studied the tracks in silence, face grim. Someone was watching the cabin, last night, maybe early this morning. Stood there. He pointed to a spot where the snow was packed down. Stood there for a while. Long enough to leave deep prints. Who? Could be poachers checking the area. Could be hikers who got lost. Could be... He stopped. Could be people from Vegas, Mara finished. Her stomach had gone cold. Looking for me. We don't know that. Who else would be watching a cabin in the middle of winter? Her voice rose despite herself. Normal people don't just wander up here. You said it yourself. This is the end of the world. Nobody comes here by accident. Rowan studied the tracks, following them to the tree line and back. Whoever it was didn't approach, didn't knock on the door or try to get in. Just watched, then left. Reconnaissance. That's what you do when you're planning something. You scout first. Maybe. He looked at her. Or maybe it was nothing, but we're going to act like it's something until we know otherwise. They spent the day securing the cabin. Rowan installed new locks, reinforced the door, set up an early warning system, fishing lines strung between trees with bells attached, so they'd hear if something large moved through the perimeter. He showed Mara the emergency supplies he'd hidden around the property, locations she needed to memorize. If someone comes and you need to run, you go to the North Cache. There's food, water, a radio, winter gear. You can survive there for weeks if you have to. His voice was flat, controlled. And if they try to take you by force, you shoot them. Center mass. Don't hesitate. Rowan, I mean it, Mara. If it comes down to you or them, you choose you. Every single time. He gripped her shoulders. Promise me. I promise. They slept in shifts that night, one watching while the other rested. But nothing came. No sounds except wind and normal night animals. The tracks in the snow mocked them with questions they couldn't answer. By the third day, tension had worn them both raw. Every sound made them flinch. Every shadow looked like threat. They were armed constantly, rifle and handgun both, and the cabin felt less like home and more like a fortress under siege. "This can't continue," Mara said. "We'll drive ourselves crazy." "Better crazy than dead." "Is it? Because this—" She gestured at the weapons, the locked doors, the way they both startled at nothing. "This isn't living. This is just surviving in a different way." Rowan set down the rifle he'd been cleaning. "What do you want me to do? Pretend those tracks don't exist? Assume everything's fine when someone was watching our house?" "No, but I want us to have a plan beyond just fear." Mara sat across from him. "If it's people from Vegas, they're not going to give up. They'll come back with more men, better prepared. We can't fight that with 2 rifles and paranoia." "So what's the plan?" "We call the Rangers, report the tracks, ask for extra patrols. We document everything, dates, times, descriptions, build a case." She leaned forward. "And if they come, if they actually approach, we don't engage. We call for help and we leave. Go to the ranger station. Stay there until it's safe." "Run away." "Strategically retreat," Mara corrected. "There's a difference between cowardice and smart tactics." Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, we'll do it your way. But if they show up and you're in danger, then you protect yourself first. I'm not worth dying for, Rowan." "That's where you're wrong." He met her eyes. "You're exactly worth dying for, because what's the point of surviving if I lose the only thing that makes survival matter?" Mara's throat tightened. "Don't say that." "It's true." "It's not." She stopped, started again. "You can't put that on me. I can't be responsible for whether your life has meaning. That's too much weight." "I'm not asking you to be responsible. I'm just stating fact." He reached across the table, took her hand. "Before you came here, I was existing, going through motions. Now I'm living. That's because of you. So yeah, you're worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth everything." She wanted to argue, to push back against the intensity of it, but looking at his face, open and honest and completely certain, she couldn't find the words. Because part of her, the part that had been alone for so long, wanted exactly this. Wanted someone to choose her, to fight for her, to make her matter. "Okay," she said quietly. "But we do it smart. No unnecessary risks, no hero moves. We survive together or not at all." "Together," Rowan agreed. They called the ranger station that afternoon, reported the tracks. The ranger, a woman named Chen who sounded tired and overworked, promised to increase patrols, but warned them she was understaffed. "Best I can do is swing by once a week, maybe twice if weather permits," she said over the crackling radio. "You folks armed?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Keep it that way. And if you see anyone suspicious, you call immediately. Don't engage, don't investigate, just call." "Understood." After the call, they sat in silence, listening to wind and the pop of logs in the fire. The cabin felt smaller, more vulnerable. The mountain that had seemed like sanctuary now felt like isolation, and isolation was a double-edged blade. "We'll be okay," Rowan said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Yeah," Mara agreed, "we'll be okay." But neither of them believed it, because the tracks in the snow had changed something fundamental, had reminded them that the world they'd left behind didn't stay left, that debts and violence and consequences followed you wherever you ran. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness beyond the cabin's light, someone was watching, waiting. The tracks didn't return for 2 weeks. Long enough that Mara started sleeping through the night again. Long enough that the constant vigilance began to wear thin and feel foolish. Spring was trying to arrive. Temperatures crept above freezing during the day, and the snow started its slow retreat to reveal brown grass and mud underneath. "March is the cruelest month up here," Rowan said one morning, watching meltwater drip from the eaves. "Not quite winter, not quite spring. Everything's unstable. Avalanche season, floods, ice breaking at the wrong time. The mountain kills more people in March than any other month." Cheerful thought. Just facts. He pulled on his coat. I need to check the creek. Spring runoff starting early this year, and if it floods, we need to know before it reaches the cabin. I'll come with you. You don't have to. We agreed. No unnecessary separation. Remember? Mara was already lacing her boots. Besides, I want to see what you're so worried about. The creek was a quarter-mile from the cabin, accessed by a trail that was more mud than snow now. Mara could hear it before she saw it. Water moving fast, angry with purpose. When they broke through the trees, she understood Rowan's concern. The creek had swollen to 3 times its normal size, brown water churning with debris, branches, chunks of ice, even a small tree trunk spinning in the current. The banks were eroding visibly, water cutting new channels through earth that couldn't hold against the assault. It's bad, Rowan said, walking the bank. Worse than last year. If this keeps up, it'll jump the banks and flood everything downstream, including... He stopped, face going pale. The emergency cache. The one I showed you. It's right in the flood path. Can we move it? Maybe, if we're fast. He was already moving back toward the cabin. We need rope, tarps, the sled, everything we can carry. They worked with desperate efficiency, loading supplies and racing back to the cache location. Water was already lapping at the container's base when they arrived. Rowan waded in, water up to his knees, ice cold and moving fast enough to knock a person down, and started hauling out supplies. Take these, he shouted over the water's roar, passing her sealed bags. Get them to high ground. Mara ran loads up the slope while Rowan emptied the cache. Food, medical supplies, ammunition, winter gear, everything he'd stockpiled for emergencies. The water rose steadily, relentless. By the time they'd moved half the supplies, it was waist deep and Rowan was struggling to keep his footing. That's enough, Mara yelled. Get out before you drown. Just a few more. Now, Rowan, it's not worth dying for. He grabbed one last bag and waded out, soaked and shivering. They retreated to high ground and watched the creek claim the cache location, water turning the container into a tumbling piece of debris that disappeared downstream. Months of work, Rowan said through chattering teeth. Gone in 20 minutes. But you're alive, and we saved most of it. Mara pulled off her dry coat and wrapped it around him. Come on, we need to get you warm before hypothermia sets in. Back at the cabin, Rowan stripped off wet clothes with hands that barely worked. Mara built up the fire and made hot coffee, forcing him to drink it despite his protests that he was fine. His lips were blue. His skin was ice. Fine was relative. You should have let me go in, she said, rubbing his arms to restore circulation. You're bigger, you lose heat faster. You think I'd let you risk drowning to save supplies? He tried to laugh, but it came out as shivers. Not happening. Stubborn man. Stubborn woman. They sat close to the fire until warmth returned to his extremities and color to his face. Outside, the sound of rushing water continued, constant reminder of forces they couldn't control. We need to check the other cache locations, Rowan said eventually. Make sure they're not in flood paths, too. Tomorrow, when you're not borderline hypothermic. Mara refilled his coffee. Today you rest. I don't need... Yes, you do. Stop arguing with me. She said it firm but gentle. You take care of me when I need it. Let me return the favor. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But tomorrow, we check everything. That night, Mara woke to strange sounds. Not water, not wind. Voices. Distant but distinct, carrying through the cold air from somewhere near the tree line. She climbed down from the loft quietly, found Rowan already awake, rifle in hand, listening. How many? She whispered. At least 2, maybe more. He moved to the window, careful not to silhouette himself. They're at the north perimeter near where we found the tracks. Should we call the rangers? Radio's in the workshop. We'd have to go outside to reach it. He checked the rifle's chamber. And I'm not leaving you here alone. The voices grew louder, accompanied by flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading since she'd left Vegas. They'd found her. Then one of the voices rose sharp and clear. Hale! Rowan Hale! You in there? Not Vegas voices. Local accent, mountain rough. Rowan's posture changed from defensive to confused. He moved to the door, cracked it open. "Who's asking?" "Dave Preston, from Miller's Creek. We got a situation down at the ranger station. Flash flood took out the access road and we got hikers trapped on the ridge. Chen radioed asking for help. Said you know these mountains better than anyone." Rowan looked back at Mara, conflict clear on his face. Then he opened the door wider. "How many trapped?" "4. College kids on spring break who didn't check the weather." Dave stepped into the light. 50s, weathered, carrying climbing gear. Another man stood behind him, younger, also geared up. "Water's still rising. If we don't get them off that ridge before dawn, they're going to die. And you need me because the standard trails are underwater and you're the only one who knows the back routes." Dave's voice was urgent. "Look, I know you keep to yourself up here, and I respect that. But those kids don't deserve to die because they were stupid. We need your help." Rowan stood there, weighing options, and Mara saw the calculation in his eyes. 7 years of isolation versus 4 lives. The man he'd been versus the man he was becoming. "I'll get my gear," he said. "Rowan," Mara stepped forward. "The tracks. Whoever was watching." "Ranger Chen's with the trapped hikers," Dave said. She asked specifically for Rowan. "This is legit." "I have to go." Rowan was already pulling on dry clothes, gathering climbing equipment. "But you stay here. Lock the doors, keep the rifle close. If anyone comes who isn't me or Dave or official rescue, you shoot first and ask questions later." "How long will you be gone?" 6 hours, maybe 8. Depends on the routes." He paused, came to her, cupped her face in his hands. "I'll come back. I promise." "You better." She tried to smile. "I didn't survive a bear attack just to lose you to a flood." He kissed her then, quick and hard and full of everything they'd never said out loud. Then he grabbed his pack and was gone, disappearing into the darkness with Dave and his partner. Mara locked the door behind them and stood in the sudden silence, rifle in her hands, and tried not to think about how alone she was. How vulnerable. How easy it would be for someone to approach now, with Rowan miles away, and help even further. The night stretched endless and cruel. She kept the fire high, the rifle loaded, and moved through the cabin, checking windows and doors every 15 minutes. The voices came back around 3 in the morning. Different voices this time. Definitely not Dave Preston's mountain accent. Smooth voices. City voices. Vegas voices. She recognized the cadence before she recognized the words. The particular rhythm of men who were used to being obeyed, who made threats sound like friendly advice. 2 of them, maybe 3, moving through the perimeter with confidence that said they'd been planning this. Mara's hands tightened on the rifle. They were here. After 4 months of running, of hiding, of building something like a life on this mountain, they'd found her. "We know you're in there, Mara." The voice was close now, just outside the door. "Marcus sent us. Says it's time to settle accounts." Marcus. The loan shark who'd given her the original 40,000, who'd watched that debt balloon into something unpayable while pretending to be sympathetic. Who'd made it clear that running wouldn't save her. "Come out and we'll talk. Make this easy on everyone." Mara didn't answer. Speaking would confirm she was alone, would give them information they'd use against her. Instead, she moved to the radio in the corner, the one Rowan kept for emergencies, and tried to remember the ranger's frequency. "We can wait all night," the voice continued. "But your boyfriend's not coming back, sweetie. We made sure of that. Him and those other rescuers, they're going to be real busy with that flood for a while. Long enough for us to finish our business here." Mara's hands shook as she turned the radio dial. Static, then voices, then more static. She didn't know the right frequency. Hadn't paid attention when Rowan called Chen. "Last chance, Mara. Come out or we come in. Your choice." She made her choice. Fired the rifle through the door. The bullet punched through wood and the voices outside erupted in shouts, surprise, and anger, but not pain. She'd missed, but she'd made her position clear. "Come through that door and someone dies." "Okay," the voice said after a moment. Calmer now, almost amused. "So that's how you want to play it. Fine. But you can't stay in there forever. And when you come out, whether it's an hour from now or a week, we'll be waiting." Footsteps retreated. Silence returned. But Mara knew they hadn't left. They were just regrouping, finding better positions, preparing for a siege she couldn't win. She tried the radio again, cycling through frequencies desperately. Static, static, static. Then, any stations in the northern quadrant? This is Ranger Chen. We have a situation. Mara grabbed the handset. Chen, this is Mara Velez at the Hale property. I have armed men outside my cabin. They followed me from Vegas and they're... Mara, slow down. How many? At least 2, maybe 3. They're waiting outside. They shot at... She stopped. They hadn't shot. She had. They're threatening to break in. Can you hold position? I don't know. They said they'd wait me out. Static. Then Chen's voice came back, different now, harder. Listen to me carefully. Do not engage. Bar the door. Stay away from windows. I'm sending every available unit to your location, but the floods have us spread thin. It might be 2 hours before anyone reaches you. 2 hours? You hold that position for 2 hours. Can you do that? Mara looked at the rifle, at the boarded window, at the door she'd shot through. Thought about the bear, about 5 rounds and absolute determination to survive. About everything Rowan had taught her, not just shooting, but stubbornness. The refusal to quit when quitting would be easier. Yeah, she said. I can hold. She spent the next hour reinforcing the door with furniture, the heavy table, both chairs, anything she could wedge against the wood. Checked ammunition, 20 rounds for the rifle, full magazine for the handgun. Not much, but enough if she made every shot count. The men outside weren't idle either. She heard them testing windows, probing walls, looking for weakness. Professional, patient. They'd done this before. Mara, the voice again, from a different angle now. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Marcus doesn't want you dead. He wants his money. $43,000 plus interest and fees. Call it $60,000 now. You pay that, we're gone. You never see us again. $60,000. Might as well be $6 million. She didn't have it, would never have it, and they knew that. I can't pay, she called back. I don't have that kind of money. Then work it off. Marcus has opportunities. Girls with your looks, you could clear $60,000 in a year. Maybe less. Work it off. She understood what that meant. What kind of opportunities Marcus offered women who couldn't pay. Her stomach turned. Not happening. Then we're at an impasse? The voice stayed reasonable, almost friendly. Because we're not leaving empty-handed. So either you pay or you work, or... He let the sentence hang. Well, there's always option 3. Option 3. Violence. The kind that left people bleeding in ditches with no answers for their families. Mara chambered around. Try option 3 and see what happens. Laughter from outside. Multiple voices now coordinating. Brave. Stupid, but brave. You know how this ends, though. You run out of bullets eventually. You get tired. You make a mistake. And we're patient men. They were right. She couldn't hold forever. But she didn't need forever. She needed 2 hours. She checked the clock. 1 hour and 40 minutes left. The first real attempt came at the 90-minute mark. They hit the back window, the one facing away from the main trail, with something heavy. Glass shattered and Mara spun, rifle up, fired at the shape trying to climb through. The shot went wide but close enough that the man dropped back cursing. That was stupid, the voice shouted. Now we're motivated. They hit 3 windows simultaneously, coordinated assault designed to split her attention. Mara fired at the closest threat, then ran to the next window, fired again. The handgun now, saving rifle ammunition. One man went down screaming, hit in the shoulder. The others pulled back. You shot Tony, the voice said. Angry now, the reasonable facade cracking. That's going to cost you. Mara didn't answer. She was counting bullets. 15 rifle rounds left, 10 in the handgun, 25 shots total. 3 men, maybe 4. She had to make every round count. The clock showed 1 hour and 15 minutes. She could do this. She had to. They tried the door next, ramming it with something, probably a log. The furniture held, but barely. Mara fired through the door again, heard someone yelp, then silence. You're dead, the voice promised. However this ends, you're dead. You know that, right? She knew. If the Rangers didn't arrive in time, if she ran out of ammunition, if she made one mistake, she was dead. But she'd been dead in Vegas too, just slower. At least here she was fighting. 50 minutes left. They went quiet then, and that was worse than the attacks. Quiet meant planning, meant they'd realized brute force wouldn't work and were trying something smarter. Mara moved through the cabin, checking angles, trying to anticipate. The smoke came first, not from the fireplace, from outside. They'd lit something, were pushing smoke through the broken windows. Thick, acrid smoke that burned her eyes and throat. Chemical smoke, not wood. They'd doused something in accelerant. Mara grabbed a wet towel and pressed it over her face, but the smoke was winning. Her eyes watered. Her lungs burned. She couldn't see, could barely breathe. This was it. They were going to smoke her out, and when she stumbled through the door, gasping for air, they'd be waiting. She dropped to the floor where the air was clearer, and Army crawled toward the door. If she was going out shooting. She'd take at least one of them with her, make them pay for every second. Her hand found the door handle. She was reaching for the barricade furniture when she heard it. Gunfire. Not her shots. Different caliber, different rhythm. Automatic weapons, military grade. And shouting. Orders being given in official voices. Drop your weapons. Federal agents. Get on the ground now. Mara stayed down, towel pressed to her face, not believing it. It could be a trick. Could be them pretending to be rescue. Then Rowan's voice cut through everything. Mara, where are you? She tried to answer, but only coughed. The door burst open, not forced, but unlocked from her side somehow, and hands were pulling her out into clean air. Rowan's hands, solid and real, dragging her away from the burning cabin into the gray light of dawn. I've got you, he was saying. You're safe. I've got you. She gulped air, coughing smoke and terror, and looked around. The clearing was full of people. Rangers, sheriff's deputies, even what looked like federal agents. And on the ground, zip-tied and face down, were 3 men in city clothes who looked very unhappy. What? She coughed. How? Dave had a sat phone. Called in reinforcements when we heard about the siege. Rowan pulled her closer, and she realized he was shaking. And Chen recognized the names you gave her. Put out a call to Vegas PD, who put out a call to the FBI. Turns out Marcus and his operation have been on federal radar for months. They were just waiting for a break. The men are under arrest. Attempted kidnapping, arson, assault with deadly weapons. A woman in FBI windbreaker approached. 40s, serious expression, badge on her belt. I'm Agent Torres. You're Mara Velez? Yes. You're very lucky. Most people don't survive encounters with Marcus DeVoe's men. She glanced at the cabin. Smoke still rising, but the fire contained. Then again, most people don't shoot back. I wasn't going to let them take me. Good instinct, because they weren't planning to bring you back alive. Torres pulled out a tablet, showed her photos. Marcus DeVoe, older than Mara remembered, harder. We've been building a case against his operation for 18 months. Loan sharking, trafficking, racketeering, 3 suspected murders. But everyone was too scared to testify. Until now. Until now? You survived, you fought back, and you gave us 3 of his enforcers on attempted kidnapping charges. Torres smiled slightly. That's enough to leverage cooperation from at least one of them. Get testimony about Marcus's operations. Maybe finally bring him down. I don't want to testify, Mara said immediately. I just want to be left alone. And you will be. The men who came here are facing 20-plus years federal time. They're not coming back for you. Torres put away the tablet. As for your debt, legally, it's unenforceable. Built on predatory lending, impossible interest rates, coercion, no judge would uphold it. You don't owe Marcus DeVoe anything. Mara stared at her. Nothing? Nothing. The debt's void. You're free. Free. The word felt foreign. She'd been running so long, hiding so hard, that freedom didn't compute. No debt, no threat, no men watching from the tree line. What about Marcus? Let us worry about Marcus. Torres stood. You just focus on staying alive and rebuilding whatever your life was before this. After the agents left and the Rangers finished securing the scene, Mara and Rowan stood in front of the cabin assessing damage. The back wall was partially burned, 3 windows shattered, bullet holes in the door. But the structure held. The frame was solid. We can fix it, Rowan said. It'll take work, but we can fix it. Is it worth fixing? Mara looked at him. After everything, the bear, the flood, the siege, maybe this place is cursed. Or maybe it's just a place, and places are what you make them. He pulled her close. Those men came for you. The mountain threw floods and fires and bears at us, and we're still standing. That's not curse. That's, he searched for the word. That's us refusing to break. Stubborn? Exactly. They spent the next week rebuilding. Rowan handled the carpentry while Mara cleaned and repaired interior damage. The Rangers checked in daily, making sure no other threats materialized. Agent Torres called twice with updates. One of the enforcers had flipped, was giving testimony about Marcus's entire operation. Federal indictments were coming. You did that, Rowan said when she told him. By surviving, by fighting back. You might have just taken down a major criminal operation. I was just trying not to die. Sometimes that's enough. March turned to April and the floods receded. The mountain bloomed, wildflowers in impossible colors, new grass green and vibrant, animals emerging from winter dens. The cabin repairs finished and it looked different now. Not perfect, not untouched, but solid. Tested and surviving. One morning in late April, Mara woke feeling strange. Not sick exactly, just off. Her body felt different, heavier. She chalked it up to stress, to the adrenaline crash after the siege, to too many nights of interrupted sleep. But when the feeling persisted and her cycle didn't come, she knew. She found the test kit in Miller's Creek on a supply run she made alone, telling Rowan she needed space to process everything that had happened, which was true, but incomplete. Took the test in the ranger station bathroom, hands shaking, and stared at the positive result for 10 full minutes. Pregnant. The word felt impossible. She was 31, had never wanted children, had spent years making sure this exact situation didn't happen. And now she was carrying a child on a mountain 8,000 feet above the world, with a man she'd known for 5 months, in a cabin that had nearly burned down 3 weeks ago. She sat in the bathroom and tried to figure out what she felt. Fear, definitely. Uncertainty. But underneath that, something else, something that might have been hope. She told Rowan that night, blunt and direct, because she didn't know how else to say it. I'm pregnant. He dropped the mug he'd been holding. It shattered on the floor, coffee spreading in dark pools. What? Pregnant. About 6 weeks, I think. The timeline matches. She stopped. They both knew when it had happened. The night after the bear, when fear and survival had turned into something else. When they'd crossed from partners into something neither had been ready to name. Are you... He couldn't seem to finish sentences. Do you want to... I don't know what I want. Mara's hands twisted together. This wasn't the plan. We weren't the plan. But here we are. Rowan sat down heavily, stared at nothing, then quietly. My brother. When he died, I thought that was it. That I'd destroyed my chance at family. That I didn't deserve another one. Rowan, but now you're here, and there's... He gestured helplessly. There's going to be a child. Our child. And I don't know if I can do this, if I'm capable of... His voice broke. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if... Mara crossed to him, took his face in her hands. You're not going to fail. You're not your brother's story. You're not your guilt. She pressed her forehead to his. And you're not alone. We're doing this together. If... She paused. If you want to. If I want to. He pulled back to look at her. Mara, I've wanted this. Wanted you. Since the moment you stayed through that first storm. Since you killed the bear. Since you held the cabin against 3 armed men and refused to break. His hands found her waist, gentle. I want this. I want you. I want... He stopped, then said it anyway. I want our family. Our family. The word settled between them, heavy with possibility. Then we're doing this, Mara said. We're doing this, he agreed. They sat together by the fire, hands joined and planned. The cabin needed baby-proofing. They'd need supplies, diapers, clothes, a crib. They'd need medical care, monthly checkups in town, a hospital plan for when labor started. The logistics were overwhelming. We should move, Rowan said suddenly, down to Miller's Creek or even further, somewhere with hospitals and schools and... No, Mara cut him off. This is home. We make it work here. Mara, having a baby on a mountain, people have been having babies in harder places for thousands of years. We'll figure it out. She looked around the cabin, scarred and repaired, marked by survival. This place nearly killed us, multiple times, but we're still here. And if we can survive bears and floods and armed men, we can handle one small human. You sure? No, but I'm sure about us. She squeezed his hand. That's enough to start with. The months that followed were brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Summer came hot and short, and Mara's body changed faster than she expected. Rowan treated her like she might shatter, which was infuriating until she realized he was terrified. Terrified of loss, of failure, of history repeating. I'm not fragile, she told him after he'd tried to carry water for her for the 10th time. I'm pregnant, not dying. I know, but no buts. I work. You stop hovering. She softened it with a smile. I'll tell you if I need help. They converted the workshop into a nursery. Walls insulated, heating installed, the cradle Rowan had built years ago finally finding its purpose. Mara sewed blankets and tiny clothes, working by lamplight while Rowan read aloud from books about child development that he'd ordered from town. It says here that babies can hear in the womb, he said one night, that talking to them helps development. So talk. He looked uncomfortable. What do I say? Anything. Tell them about the mountain, about the goats, about how their mother killed a bear. She guided his hand to her swelling stomach. Tell them they're wanted. So he did. Every night, Rowan would sit with his hand on Mara's belly and talk to their child. About the mountain seasons, about building things with your hands, about the importance of stubbornness, and slowly, Mara watched him transform from a man serving penance into a man building a future. The pregnancy was hard. Morning sickness that lasted into the second trimester, back pain, exhaustion. The altitude didn't help. The doctor in town warned them that high-elevation pregnancies carried risks, urged them to consider relocating. They refused. We're staying, Mara told her. Figure out how to make it work. So they did. Monthly trips to town for checkups, emergency plans with the rangers. Rowan learned basic midwifery from books and YouTube videos downloaded on the library computers, just in case. They prepared for every contingency they could imagine. Winter returned, Mara's second on the mountain, and she was huge now, moving slowly, breathless with the baby pressing on her lungs. The due date was late January, and as Christmas approached, tension built. What if I can't get you to the hospital in time? Rowan asked one night, staring at the snow accumulating outside. Then you deliver the baby here, like we've practiced. Mara, we've survived everything else. We'll survive this too. She took his hand. Stop waiting for disaster. It's exhausting. But disaster was patient. It waited until mid-January, until a storm had closed the roads and made the hospital unreachable. Waited until 2 in the morning when Mara's water broke, and she woke Rowan with a calm that belied her terror. It's time. He moved into action, boiled water, laid out supplies, radioed the ranger station. Chen couldn't reach them but talked them through via radio, her voice steady and professional. A medical helicopter was on standby, but the storm made flying impossible. They were on their own. Labor was brutal. 20 hours of pain that rewrote Mara's understanding of suffering. She screamed and swore, and at one point told Rowan she hated him, which he accepted with grace. He held her hand, wiped her face, breathed with her through contractions that felt like they'd split her in half. I can't, she gasped during hour 18. I can't do this anymore. Yes, you can. You've done harder things. Name one. You survived Vegas. You survived the bear. You survived 3 armed men trying to kill you. He pressed his forehead to hers. You're the strongest person I know, and you can do this. So she did. At dawn on January 23rd, with snow falling outside and Rowan's hands guiding her, Mara pushed their daughter into the world. The baby was tiny, red-faced, screaming with indignation at the cold air and bright lights. Rowan cut the cord with shaking hands, wrapped her in warm blankets, placed her on Mara's chest. And in that moment, exhausted and destroyed and more alive than she'd ever been, Mara understood why people did this. why they suffered and risked and bet everything on small humans who couldn't even hold their own heads up. Because this perfect, screaming, impossible person was worth everything. She's beautiful, Rowan whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. She's perfect. What should we name her? They'd discussed names for months without deciding. Now, looking at their daughter's face, Rowan said, Hope. We should call her Hope. After everything that tried to kill us, you want to name our daughter Hope? Because despite everything that tried to kill us, here she is. He looked at Mara, eyes wet. Here we all are. That's not survival anymore. That's hope. So Hope she became. Hope Velez Hale, born on a mountain during a blizzard, delivered by her father in a cabin that had been rebuilt from fire damage. Born into a family that hadn't existed 6 months earlier, to parents who'd learned to build life from broken pieces. The helicopter came 2 days later when the storm cleared, medics checking both mother and baby and declaring them healthy despite the circumstances. They offered to transport them to the hospital for observation. Mara and Rowan refused. We're staying, Mara said, Hope sleeping against her chest. This is home, Rowan added. The medics exchanged looks that said these people are crazy, but they left supplies and emergency numbers and wished them luck. That spring, with Hope 3 months old and thriving, Ranger Chen visited with unexpected news. The federal case against Marcus DeVoe closed yesterday, she said over coffee. Convicted on 17 counts, trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. He got 40 years, no parole. Mara felt something loosen in her chest. It's really over? It's over. The men who came here got 25 years each for the kidnapping attempt. Every other defendant in his organization either took deals or is awaiting trial. Chen smiled. You did that by surviving, by testifying. You helped bring down an operation that hurt hundreds of people. After Chen left, Mara stood on the porch holding Hope, looking at the mountain that had tested them so thoroughly. The snows were melting again. Another winter survived. The cabin stood solid, reinforced, repaired, marked by survival but standing. Rowan came out to join them, wrapping his arms around both of them. What are you thinking? That we made it, through everything, the storms, the bear, the floods, the men with guns. We made it. She looked at their daughter, at this impossible person they'd created. And we built something real. Yeah. He kissed her temple. We really did. In the distance, Maggie, the goat, bleated, demanding attention. The chickens scratched in their coop. The mountain stood eternal and indifferent, caring nothing for human drama. But up here, 8,000 feet above a world that had tried to destroy them, 2 broken people had built a family from survival and stubbornness. Had learned that love wasn't pretty words or perfect moments. It was showing up when things got hard, fighting when running would be easier, choosing connection over safety. They'd started as strangers bound by desperation. They'd survived as partners forged by necessity. And now, with their daughter sleeping between them and spring coming to the mountain, they were simply home. The trials weren't over. There would be more winters, more struggles, more tests from a mountain that didn't care if they lived or died. But they'd face them together, Mara and Rowan and Hope and whatever future they built from here. And that, finally, was enough.